Today we're going to talk about the desperate stunts that Republicans are pulling to distract from both their own agenda and some recent wins by Democrats. And I interview Congressman Adam Schiff about Kevin McCarthy removing him from the House Intelligence Committee, whether he thinks George Santos can still serve his constituents effectively, and on his Senate run, why he chose to enter this race, and whether he and Katie Porter would ever consider staying in Congress if one of them seemed to be running away with that race. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen, and you're watching No Lie. So I thought for this week we'd try something a little different. Just want to kind of highlight a snapshot of where the two parties are at in real time, because we have the luck of being able to directly compare a Democratic administration and a Republican majority in the House. So we're contending with two threats from Republicans right now. First and most importantly, Kevin McCarthy has decided to take his debt ceiling threats and double down, saying this.
When the White House said that the president's open to talking about the debt ceiling and a separate discussion about ways to control spending, I mean, what do you think about when you hear that they kind of want to separate those two, is what they say?
Whichever way they want to talk about it, I'm very clear. We will not pass a clean debt ceiling here without some form of spending reform. So there'll never be a clean one. I don't know how they want to say it, that's fine. But at the end of the day, we're going to get spending reforms.
That he won't pass a clean debt ceiling bill, but instead will use it to exact concessions in the form of spending reform. So what does spending reform actually mean? Great question. Let's ask Kevin McCarthy.
Where should those budget cuts come from right now? Medicare and Social Security, the White House insists Republicans want to cut. What cuts do you want?
Well, let me be clear about that, and I've been clear many times. No, we're not talking about that. And to really be able to do this right, I'm not going to negotiate this in the press, right? I respect the conversation we had together, and we will continue that.
Okay, so I guess you won't tell us what spending reform is, but we have some guesses here. The most obvious is that spending reform is the shiny new nickname for entitlement reform, which Republicans have been trying to do for decades, where they eliminate your earned benefits of Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. Now, another option is that they try to pass the Fair Tax Act, which would eliminate personal income taxes, corporate taxes, payroll taxes, the inheritance tax, and replace all of that with a 30% national sales tax. And so instead of the rich carrying the majority of the tax burden in this country, which would make sense considering they possess the bulk of the money in this country, the tax burden would be transferred to the working poor. Like, on average, about 40% of American households don't pay a federal income tax because they don't make enough money. And so under this plan, you would take people who already aren't making enough money to even qualify for income tax payments and then slap a 30% premium on literally everything? The only way to make this war on the poor more obvious is if they just called it a war on the poor. And to be clear now, the debt ceiling is the only opportunity for Republicans to pass any legislation this cycle. Like, nothing that they pass will make it through the Democratic-led Senate or withstand Biden's veto. And so this debt ceiling bill is it. This is their only chance to try and exact concessions, and they're going to go to the mat to do it. But with that said, it also won't be popular. And so it's also incumbent on Republicans to distract you. And man, that is exactly what they're doing. Here is just a light sampling from our dear friend Marjorie Taylor Greene on the whole distraction strategy.
Dodaro, can you tell me how much COVID cash went to CRT?
CRT?
Critical race theory in education. It's a racist curriculum used to teach children that somehow their white skin is not equal to black skin and other things in education.
Yeah. No, I do not know that, but I do know that there's provisions that the federal funds generally are not used, are supposed to be used for curriculum.
Oh.
That's a state.
Oh, Mr. Dodaro, I have to tell you, in Illinois, they received $5.1 billion at an elementary school there that used it for equity and diversity. So it's being used for these things. Mr. Dodaro, can you tell me how much money was given to Drag Queen Story Hour?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that? Who?
Drag Queen Story Time, where men dress up as women and read confusing books to children.
Okay. First, I thought you said dry clean. So, I'm sorry. No, I don't know the answer to either one of those two.
Oh, we need to look into this, and I urge you to do that. Bradbury Sullivan LGBT Community Center in Pennsylvania received $16,000 for Drag Queen Story Time from COVID cash. I think this is an issue that needs to be looked into. A lot of this money went to things that should have never gone to, and I thank you so much, and I yield back the remainder of my time.
Yeah, that poor guy was the Controller General, and I think he is a pretty good encapsulation of what the 90% of Americans who don't mainline Fox News would say when confronted with any of the bananas talking points that these people spew on a daily basis. Like, it's just been a barrage of critical race theory and drag queens and gay M&Ms and pronouns and Dr. Seuss and Mr. Potato Head. Just endless culture war BS. But it's on purpose. There is a reason that the right has to focus on that stuff, and it's because their legislative agenda is currently deciding whether they'll take away your Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, or whether they'll try to impose a 30% tax on the entire country. I'll tell you what, if that was my agenda, I'd probably be throwing a bunch of drag queen spaghetti at the wall to distract you too. All the while, on the left, just to give a snapshot of an issue that actually impacts Americans, the January jobs report was just released, and instead of the roughly 188,000 jobs that were expected, the economy added 517,000 jobs, bringing the total jobs added during this presidency to 12.1 million. Not only the most jobs ever added in the first 2 years of a term, but more jobs than have ever been added even in a 4-year term. Manufacturing jobs are up to 800,000, thanks in large part to the CHIPS Act and the Inflation Reduction Act, which led to an explosion in jobs in renewables and fiber and chips. The unemployment rate is down to 3.4%, the lowest it's been in 54 years. That's down 45% since Biden took office. Black and Hispanic unemployment is also near record lows at 5.4% and 4.5% respectively. We've had the strongest 2 years for small business applications on record, with 10.5 million new businesses created. Real wages are higher than they were 7 months ago. Those are up 4.4% in the past year. And even on the inflation and the gas price front, inflation is down for the 6th straight month, with the headline CPI at negative 0.1%, and gas prices are down $1.50 from their peak. Again, the difference from when you invest in the economy from the bottom up versus the top down could not be more apparent. If you needed any more proof that Republicans' 40-year failed experiment on trickle-down economics doesn't work, this is it. This administration invested in jobs for regular people, policies for regular people, gave bailout funds to regular people who needed them, expanded the child tax credit for regular people, and the result is that the U.S. had the fastest recovery from COVID of any G7 country. I know you'll be shocked to hear that it's possible to bail people out who aren't millionaires and billionaires, but it is, and it turns out that strategy works a lot better. And so it shouldn't be a surprise that the GOP wants to distract you. Whether it's their own dangerous economic policies or the successful ones by the Democrats, the fact is that what they are selling isn't going to be very attractive to Americans. So get ready for God knows how many more months or years of culture wars about candy not being attractive enough for Tucker Carlson, or imaginary graduate-level courses in elementary schools, and an endless barrage of pretending that children are in imminent danger from things that don't exist, like litter boxes. But just know that if they had anything worthwhile to run on, they wouldn't need to scare you with things that don't exist. Here's a preview of my interview with Adam Schiff. Marjorie Taylor Greene this past week peppered the Controller General with questions about critical race theory and drag queen story hour. Dodaro actually channeled the entire country by being as visibly confused as the rest of us. Do you think that this is the agenda that they're going to squander their majority with? Faux outrage about critical race theory and drag queen story hour and M&Ms and on and on.
Yes, I think that's exactly what they're going to do. They're not interested in legislating. They're not interested in governing. They're only interested in tearing down and sensationalism. And so, sadly, people look at Marjorie Taylor Greene in the Republican conference and they're like, okay, this nobody of a congresswoman has now this big following, can raise a lot of money. Maybe that's where the power and glory is in the GOP. So she has many imitators. And this is what's brought, the kind of Tea Party movement to the present. This extreme element is now in the center of the Republican conference. And because they have no legislative agenda, because they have no ideas, because they have no interest in governing, you can expect a lot more circus-like tactics like you saw in that hearing.
Another beacon of integrity on the right is George Santos. Do you feel that he's able to effectively serve his constituents in this Congress?
No, absolutely not. He's a joke. And sadly, it was a joke that is going to have dire consequence for his constituents who were defrauded. But I will say this. We should see Santos for what he really is, and that is he is the living, walking, breathing embodiment of a Republican Party that 6 years ago, with the election of Donald Trump, decided it had no interest in the truth anymore. Donald Trump lied in office thousands and thousands of times. And so what's more natural than to come out of that party than someone who is a complete fraud himself like George Santos?
To check out the full interview with Adam Schiff, click the thumbnail right here on the screen or check out the interviews playlist on my YouTube channel. And as always, if you want to see more of my content, including videos on daily breaking news stories, don't forget to subscribe.